Pop quiz. What did Treasury Secretary Jack Lew learn this week? Answer: defending your boss's cuddle fest with Iran in front of Jewish Americans at the Jerusalem Post annual conference is not such a good idea. Jack Lew was booed off the stage, as you saw. One Israeli newspaper deemed it one of the surliest receptions ever accorded to such a high-ranking administration official by a Jewish audience in the United States. So was the crowd right and justified? Well, I welcome Israeli relations expert Philippe Assouline to give his take on this whole debacle. Philippe, what did you think of it? Was it wise to send Jack Lew in front of the Jerusalem Post annual conference?
I think it's safe to say at this point that it wasn't. President Obama's been like kind of a charm offensive with American Jewry, trying to make the point, it's not me, it's you, right? Something happened in Israel, something went wrong, we lost our values, supposedly. And he sent Jack Lew because Jack Lew is an Orthodox Jew. And maybe he thought that he could connect with the crowd better, but Israelis are not known for being understated or particularly polite. And maybe because Jack Lew is one of the tribe, they felt even more comfortable giving him a piece of their mind. The American Jews on the right and Israelis are not really buying President Obama's charm offensive.
Well, I'm not buying it either. I know neither are you, but I want to go back to him getting booed off the stage. Yeah, it was a little disrespectful. Yes, I will give him that. But do you think that they were legitimate in their concerns, had a reason to boom off the stage? This non-deal with Iran could be deadly for Israel.
Yes, so not how they did it, but the sentiment behind it I can understand. President Obama gave an interview to Israeli media last week, long interview, and he was asked, but what do we do if Iran has sanctions relief and then all of a sudden it could arm Hezbollah and Hamas and all these other groups that it's already funding, you know, and it could multiply the amount of money these very dangerous groups have. And his answer was, that's probably not going to happen. So that's not a level of assurance that Israelis can live with, a probably not happen kind of assurance that Iran, which has been making incredibly aggressive statements and moves in the region and is funding Hezbollah and Hamas, probably won't fund them. That's just not good enough. So Jews are not buying it. President Obama loves to say he stands by Israel, and he has in most of the cases, but in certain key cases he hasn't. And Israelis are very afraid, and they remember those key moments.
Well, of course they do. We know President Obama and his rhetoric on this issue. Now, we know Prime Minister Netanyahu actually tweeted something out saying that not only would such a deal not block a path to Iran developing a nuclear weapon, it would pave it. And that's what so many Americans are saying, especially the Republicans, and you and I have talked about that political wedge issue here in the United States. But I have to wonder, are the Jewish Americans and Israeli Jews, are they all in line together on this thing? Do they all stand in solidarity against this Iran non-deal?
Not yet. We may be headed in that direction. There's increasingly a sense of being besieged in the Jewish community if you combine BDS and how the Europeans have been acting in this Iran deal. But so far, and generally, the American community is split, like America split. But it's mostly been on, most Jews are on the liberal side in America for historical reasons.
That's why I love to have you on. That's why I want to get your take on something else. You and I have talked about the differences between what the media reports about Israel and what life is actually like in Israel. And I'm excited because you're going to be actually Skyping us from Israel in the coming weeks. Very excited to see that. But I wonder, everyday middle-class Israelis, is this Iran deal, a nuclear Iran, is that something that they worry about on a daily basis?
Yes and no. To be Israeli means to know how to put certain things on the back burner, like to worry in a non-active way, right? There's always this stress. There's always this worry that our kids are going to the army and there could be a war like we spoke of last week. At any moment, it could blow up. So Iran is definitely a big source of stress. But there are so many other issues that attract daily attention, like the price, the cost of living, which you allowed me to talk about a couple of weeks ago. That's also very, very prominent. So finally, I would add, if anything, there's a sense of resignation that they can't really do much and that they have to trust the government. So I would say they are worrying about it, but it's not something prominent because they don't feel they have immediate control over it. And you just would go crazy if you think about Iran and its statements and potentially getting a nuclear weapon, right? Some people like to put it on the back burner, but it's very present in that back burner, right? It is driving a lot of fear subconsciously in the country.
Well, you know, I'm an American. I'm here in San Diego, but it actually does drive some of my fear. And what Iran's doing, especially with support for the Houthi rebels as well, what we're seeing in Yemen right now, it does worry me. And here I am in San Diego, so I think it's a worldwide, global thing. We need to keep an eye on Iran. You mentioned it's not just Iran getting a nuclear weapon, it's also the funding mechanism for Hamas and Hezbollah. Those are the things we need to keep in mind when we're talking about the Iran deal. But I want to move on in our remaining minutes to talk about the UN, because they are always so tough on Israel. Now we've got them coming out once again against Israel. So why is Israel in such a difficult spot in the global stage?
So the UN in particular is a great question. Most people don't know. Israel used to have fantastic relations with Africa, a lot of help to Africa, a lot of agricultural help, etc. And in the 1970s, the Arab oil exporting countries used oil as a weapon, and it collapsed the U.S. economy for a while. And they used this weapon to get support, among other things, at the UN against Israel, such that still today you have an automatic majority against Israel. In the Human Rights Council, Israel is the only country where there's a regular agenda item. Let's condemn Israel this month again. No other country gets this, even though Israel's a democracy. When you have an automatic majority, it's a nice way to take a jab at Israel. And now the American administration is threatening to not defend Israel at the UN, which would really hurt because, you know, that's one of the last things Israel has going for it is the American support of the UN. But the automatic majority is because the Arabs in the 1970s, 1973, used oil as a weapon, and the condition of giving oil to all these developing countries was you side with us at the UN.
And what we see in the media is it being characterized as the UN, this wonderful, compassionate body, is going after Israel for their horrible war crimes and killing of Palestinians. That's what the mainstream media tells you, but they don't tell you the business on the side there, why the UN really goes after Israel. But I want to move on to talking again, this comes back to the Iran deal. Do you think that Israel's a little bit worried because if Iran is not top priority, the deal with Iran and the negotiations are not top priority, that suddenly the UN will shift focus and really hit them hard on the whole peace process?
I don't know if that's driving Israel's worries because we're resigned to it, right? There's nothing really that Israel can do. It's going to happen anyway. They're still putting out decisions that we are the worst violators of X, Y, and Z, which is completely absurd if you look at reality on the ground. Maybe Iran is useful in some ways to the some of the Israeli government because it deflects attention from the Palestinian issue. But I don't think so. I think there's really a concern and a lack of feeling that there's any control over it, right? The Jewish lobby has been doing, or the Israel lobby, which actually is supported mostly by Christians now, I think, but has done everything it can to try to change this deal, modify it, thwart it, and there's nothing really that's done. Obama and his administration have decided on a new strategy in the Middle East, and the Israelis feel pretty much powerless.
Well, Philippe, in closing here, let's talk about Obama's strategy in the Middle East. It's called not having a complete strategy, and he said it himself. But I can't wait to have you back joining us from Israel very soon. It's always great to see you here.